All right, welcome back to Study Hall, where we try to break down some of these complex topics and maybe try to make some sense of it all. Today we're tackling something that directly affects all of us. Those laws around politicians and their investment, stock investments. Ever get that nagging feeling like they might just have a bit of an unfair advantage when it comes to the market?
Yeah, I mean, it is a valid concern, isn't it? And there's a lot of debate swirling around it. So we're going to be taking a deep dive into one proposed solution. It's the Ending Trading and Holdings in Congressional Stocks Act. But you probably know it better as the Ethics Act.
Okay, the Ethics Act. Right, let's unpack this thing. And we actually have excerpts from the actual bill itself, full of legalese. Don't worry, we'll translate it, back into plain English. And honestly, I got to say it is actually pretty interesting. But first let's go back to basics here. Why does this bill even exist? What's the issue? What's the perceived issue with members of Congress, buying and selling stocks?
Well, I mean, at the heart of it, it really boils down to, the potential for conflicts of interest. I mean, members of Congress, they have access to a lot of information, that the general public just doesn't have, think classified briefings, early whispers about changes in policy, maybe even, insider knowledge about economic trends, all kinds of stuff.
Oh, so hypothetically, they could use all that insider information to make a pretty savvy stock trader too, huh?
Precisely, yeah. I mean, just imagine a scenario where a senator, say, learns about a massive government contract. It's about to be awarded to a specific company. What if they buy stock in that company, before the news goes public, knowing that stock price is just likely to, skyrocket when the news breaks?
Yeah, that sounds an awful lot like insider trading to me.
Yeah, it does raise questions, even if it doesn't technically violate, insider trading laws. It certainly, it creates a perception problem. It erodes public trust when it looks like lawmakers are prioritizing their own, financial gain over the interests of their constituents.
I mean, it's like that old saying, justice must not only be done, but it must also be seen to be done.
Right.
Even just the appearance of impropriety can be just so damaging. So this Ethics Act is trying to tackle both the real potential for insider trading and also the public's perception of it, trying to thread that needle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's trying to draw a clear line in the sand and hopefully restore some faith in the system.
Okay, so we've kind of established the problem here, right? Now let's get to the solution. What does this Ethics Act actually propose to do? How does it want to fix this?
Well, it gets pretty specific. I mean, it lays out a whole, set of rules, a whole set of restrictions, and one of the key provisions is a ban on members of Congress buying or selling what the bill calls covered investments.
Covered investments. That sounds like lawyer speak for something. What exactly are we talking about here?
Yeah, it's basically a fancy way of saying, most individual stocks and other assets that, could be influenced by a member of Congress's official actions or knowledge. We're talking about, things like, individual company stocks, bonds, commodities, and even some cryptocurrency.
Whoa. So no more, no more casually dabbling in the stock market for our elected officials.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty big deal.
It is, yeah. The idea is, to remove any temptation, any opportunity, for them to use their position for personal financial gain.
Okay, so that covers the buying and selling, right?
Yeah.
But what about investments they, already own? Do they have to sell everything off?
Well, the bill gives them a little bit of a grace period. They have 90 days from the date the bill's enacted to divest. Sell off those covered investments. And it's not just them, by the way. This applies to their spouses and dependent children, too.
So no sneaky loopholes where a Congress member can just, have their spouse manage the stock portfolio.
Right, yeah. The bill aims to close those loopholes, ensure, transparency, leveling the playing field, making sure, everyone plays by the same rules.
Makes sense. But okay, say I'm a member of Congress, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I inherit a bunch of stock from my grandma, What happens then? Do I have to sell off grandma's legacy?
That's a great question. Yeah, and the bill does address inheritances. You would have 120 days to either divest those inherited assets, or place them in what's called a qualified blind trust.
Okay, time for a vocabulary lesson. What in the world is a qualified blind trust? I mean, come on.
Think of it like this. You're handing over your entire investment portfolio to a completely independent trustee, someone who has, no connection to you, and they're legally obligated to manage your assets without, your input or knowledge.
So it's kind of like a black box for your money. You literally don't know what they're, buying or selling on your behalf.
Exactly. Yeah. That way, even if you did have some, insider information, you couldn't use it to your advantage because you wouldn't know what trades were being made.
Okay. That's pretty clever. It takes the temptation completely off the table. But I have to ask, are there any exceptions? Any exception to these rules? Like what about investments that are considered, like low risk and diversified?
You're right. There are some exemptions. For example, diversified mutual funds and exchange traded funds, ETFs. Those are exempt. The reasoning being that these funds hold a wide range of stocks, right?
Okay.
So it's much harder to manipulate the market, or profit from insider information.
Yeah, makes sense. It'd be like trying to rig the entire stock market by buying a few extra shares of Apple. So besides ETFs, what else kind of gets a pass here?
Well, U.S. Treasury bills, notes, and bonds. Those are also exempt. Those are considered, very low risk since they're essentially loans to the government. And there's an interesting exemption for small businesses.
Whole businesses. That's unexpected. How does that work?
Yeah, so you're allowed to hold an interest in a small business, but only if the supervising ethics office, the folks in charge of enforcing all these rules determine that it doesn't pose a conflict of interest. So think family farms, local shops, things like that.
Okay, so it's support local businesses without creating a giant ethical dilemma. But okay.
Mm-hmm.
What about those family trusts we talked about earlier? Are they exempt too?
Well, it's a bit more complicated when it comes to family trusts. The bill does allow for exemptions, but there are strict requirements. For example, the member of Congress, they can't be the one who created the trust, or contributed assets to it, and they also can't have any control over the trustee.
So basically, they have to inherit the trust from a family member and have absolutely no influence over how it's managed. I mean that sounds pretty strict.
It is, yeah, and there's a transparency element too. Any requests for an exemption, those have to be published online, for everyone to see, along with the ethics office's, decision.
And no hiding behind closed doors on this one. Now, this is where I want to hear from you, our listeners. Do you think these exemptions for things like mutual funds, small businesses, family trust, are they fair, or do they create too many loopholes? Let us know what you think.
While you ponder that, we're gonna take a closer look at the enforcement mechanisms in the Ethics Act. What happens if a member of Congress breaks these rules? What are the consequences? Stay tuned for the answer. Welcome back to Study Hall. We're still here knee deep in this Ethics Act. This ambitious bill trying to put the brakes on those eyebrow raising stock trades by our elected officials.
Yeah, we've already, we've gone through why this bill even exists.
Mm-hmm.
The whole potential for conflicts of interest and the public's, dwindling trust in lawmakers playing the stock market. And we even went into the nitty-gritty of, what's banned, from individual stocks to even crypto.
Right. We laid out those ground rules. No more insider trading for those folks on Capitol Hill. And we even talked about those qualified blind trusts, which honestly sound like something straight out a spy movie.
Seriously.
Yeah.
It's like handing over your financial life to like a secret agent who's investing your money while wearing a blindfold, But okay. All those rules, all those restrictions, they sound great on paper, but what about in practice?
That's where the rubber meets the road. And that's what we're gonna be looking at now, the enforcement mechanisms. Think of it as the teeth behind the bill's bark.
Okay, let's get to the good stuff. What happens if a Congress member just decides, you know what? I'm going to ignore all these rules. I'm going to make some shady stock trades. Are we talking a slap on the wrist or something with, a little more bite?
Oh, the Ethics Act, it takes enforcement pretty seriously. It sets up this multi-layered system to kind of keep things in check. First off, you've got the supervising ethics office, right? You can think of them as the financial watchdogs of Congress.
Oh, so they're the ones making sure no one's, secretly buying, stock in companies they're about to regulate or something like that.
Exactly, yeah. They'll be combing through those financial disclosures, the ones we talked about earlier, making sure everything is on the, on the up and up. And if they find something fishy, well, that's when the penalties come in.
All right. Let's talk consequences.
Yeah.
What kind of penalties are we talking here? A stern talking to, a timeout in the congressional corner.
Think a little more concrete, like some serious fines. For example, if a member of Congress, fails to report a transaction, and remember they have to report all those stock moves, they'll face a hefty fine. $500 for each violation.
$500 per trade. That could add up quickly, especially if they're a frequent trader.
Precisely, yeah. And those penalties, they get even steeper for for more serious violations, like failing to divest those banned investments within the timeline, or messing around with those those qualified blind trusts.
Oh, so the message is clear. Play by the rules or pay a price.
Yeah.
But beyond those, financial penalties, are there any other repercussions? Public shaming,
Yeah.
censure by their peers.
Well, the bill doesn't, explicitly lay out those specific punishments, but there is a powerful element of, public scrutiny built in. Remember that supervising ethics office, they have to make all their findings, they can make them public.
So any ethics violation basically gets blasted, on the internet for all to see. That's got to be a pretty strong deterrent, especially for those folks who are, worried about re-election.
Yeah, it's a potent mix of, financial consequences and reputational damage. And there's always the possibility, right, that those violations could trigger a full-blown investigation by the, the Department of Justice. So the stakes are pretty high.
Okay, so we've got the watchdogs, we've got the fines, we've got the public shame. That's a pretty solid enforcement mechanism. But let's kind of shift gears for a minute and talk about transparency. How can we, the everyday citizens, how can we keep an eye on all of this, right? And make sure our elected officials are playing by the rules.
Yeah, well, transparency is really a cornerstone of the Ethics Act. One of the key provisions is public access to all those financial disclosure reports we've been talking about.
Wait, public access, like anyone can just hop online and see what their senators investing in.
Yep, that's the idea. The bill mandates electronic filing and online publication of those reports. No more digging through dusty paper files or submitting Freedom of Information Act requests.
So we're talking searchable databases with all the juicy details about their assets, transactions, the whole shebang.
You got it. Imagine it like browsing your favorite online shopping site, but instead of shoes or gadgets, you're checking out your Congress member's stock portfolio.
That's amazing. It really puts the power
Yeah.
right in the hands of the people. I can already picture some intrepid citizen journalists out there combing through these databases and then covering all sorts of shady dealings.
Well, that's the beauty of transparency, right? It empowers citizens to hold their elected officials accountable. And while some politicians might not be thrilled about this level of scrutiny, it's a vital step in rebuilding public trust.
Sunlight is the best disinfectant, as they say. Okay, so we've covered the problem, we've covered the solution, we've covered the watchdogs, the penalties, and the public's right to know. But let's zoom out for a minute and look at the bigger picture. What does all of this tell us about the state of ethics in Congress?
Well, I mean, the fact that this the fact that this bill even exists is a pretty clear indication that public trust in in elected officials is, let's say, a bit fragile, right now.
Yeah. Yeah, a bit fragile might be an understatement. I mean, between the partisan gridlock and the the occasional scandals that pop up, it's no wonder people are skeptical.
The Ethics Act is an attempt to address those those concerns head on. It's about sending a message that Congress is taking ethical conduct seriously and is committed to restoring faith in our democratic institutions.
Yeah, it's a tall order for sure. But is it enough? Does this bill go far enough to really, really tackle the problem? We'll explore that question and more when we return after quick message. Don't touch that don't touch that dial. And we're back to study hall. We spent this whole episode digging into this Ethics Act. This attempt to kind of rein in congressional stock trading. We've gone over the potential conflicts of interest, the proposed ban on certain investments, those intriguing qualified blind trusts, and even the potential penalties for those who break the rules. But the big question lingering in the air is, does this bill actually go far enough?
That is the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? And it sparked a pretty heated debate. Some people they argue that the Ethics Act, despite its good intentions, it doesn't really address the root of the problem. They believe that a complete ban on individual stock ownership by members of Congress, that's the only way to truly eliminate conflicts of interest.
Whoa, a total ban. That's a pretty radical solution. But wouldn't that discourage people from running for office if they had to liquidate all their assets and essentially put their financial lives on hold?
Yeah, that's one of the arguments against a complete ban. Critics they say it would create an unfair barrier to entry, especially for folks who aren't already wealthy. They argue it could lead to a Congress made up entirely of the super rich, which wouldn't exactly reflect the diversity of the American people.
Yeah. No, I see their point. It's a tough balance, right? You want to prevent conflicts of interest, but you also don't want to create a system where only the elite can afford to serve in government. It's a tough one.
It's a complex issue with valid arguments on both sides. And then there's another camp, in this debate. Those who believe that instead of crafting new laws, we should focus on enforcing the ones we already have.
You mean the existing laws against insider trading? Those already apply to everyone, including members of Congress, right?
Right, exactly. But the problem is proving insider trading. It's notoriously difficult. You have to demonstrate intent, that the person knowingly used non-public information to make a trade, which can be really tough to prove in court.
So it's not just about having the rules in place. It's about having the means to enforce them, effectively.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's why some people argue that stricter enforcement mechanisms and harsher penalties, those are the key. We're talking about things like increasing the fines. Implementing mandatory ethics training for all members of Congress, and maybe even pursuing criminal charges in egregious cases.
It seems like there's no easy answer here, right? It's a tangled web of ethical considerations, legal complexities, and political realities. So what do you think? What do you think, dear listeners? Where do you fall on the spectrum? Do you believe the Ethics Act is a step in the right direction, or do we need to consider more radical solutions like a total ban on individual stock ownership? What do you think?
It's a question worth pondering, isn't it? And it gets to the heart of what we expect from our elected, officials. The Ethics Act, even with its limitations, its, exemptions, it's an attempt, right? It's an attempt to address a very, very real concern, the potential for conflicts of interest to erode public trust in our government.
And at the end of the day, it's up to us. It's up to us, the citizens, to hold our elected officials, accountable, to demand transparency, to push for ethical conduct, and to ensure that our democracy serves the people, not just the powerful. What's fascinating here is that this bill, it's just one piece. It's just one piece of a much larger puzzle, right? What other measures, beyond what we've discussed today, what other measures could help, ensure ethical conduct and maintain public trust, in our government? That's something to ponder as you go about your day.
And we hope this deep dive into the Ethics Act has given you a better understanding of this, this complex issue.
And remember, knowledge is power. Keep those brain cells buzzing, and we'll see you next time in study hall.